A fool flatters herself in the mirror. A wise woman reflects in silence. Inspired by Marcus Aurelius. In the age of filters, flexing, and false self-importance, what makes a woman stupid has little to do with IQ, and everything to do with character, mindset, and how she handles life, people, and power. A Stoic doesn't throw insults for entertainment. He observes, reflects, and learns. Because who you allow into your circle, especially romantically, can either elevate your life or destroy it. So today, let's get brutally honest. Let's break down 7 signs of a stupid woman, not to judge, but to wake up. To protect yourself. And to remember, a man of wisdom must never get entangled with a woman ruled by chaos. 1. She's loud about everything, silent about nothing. A stupid woman can't help but speak. Gossip is her therapy, drama is her nutrition, and silence is her enemy. The Stoics taught, we have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we may listen more and speak less. But she talks first, thinks later. Or never. If her mouth runs faster than her mind, run faster in the other direction. 2. She values attention over respect. Watch what lights her up, likes, stares, validation, or self-respect, loyalty, and discipline. A foolish woman sells her dignity for attention. She calls it empowerment, but it's insecurity in disguise. A woman addicted to external validation will never value the internal work it takes to build a strong relationship. 3. She mistakes sexual power for emotional intelligence. She knows how to attract but not how to build. She can seduce, but she can't sustain. Stoic wisdom says, what's easily given is rarely valued. A stupid woman leads with her body and believes it makes her valuable. But real value comes from what a woman can withstand, not what she can expose. 4. She avoids accountability like it's a disease. A foolish woman is always the victim. If things go wrong, it's someone else's fault. Her ex, her boss, her jealous haters. You'll never hear her say, I was wrong. A woman who cannot be accountable is not mature. And the Stoics would say, you cannot grow what you do not own. 5. She worships chaos and calls it passion. She says she loves deeply, but it's really possessiveness. She says she's a lot to handle, but it's just emotional immaturity. If everything in her life is always a storm, understand this, it's not bad luck. It's her lifestyle. And you're next in line to get struck. 6. She disrespects good men, but worships toxic ones. This is a sign not just of foolishness, but of spiritual confusion. A woman who rejects kindness and loyalty for arrogance and manipulation is not misunderstood, she's misled. She confuses strength with cruelty. And that confusion will cost you everything if you entertain it. 7. She has no purpose beyond herself. A stupid woman is obsessed with being seen, but she stands for nothing. She wants to be a queen, but refuses to serve anything greater than her ego. Purpose doesn't interest her, only pleasure, status, and superficial success. The Stoics believed that to live without purpose is to live foolishly. And the worst part? If you bind yourself to a woman with no direction, she'll gladly make you her purpose, and then destroy you when you fail to fill her empty soul. A wise man doesn't hate a stupid woman, he avoids her. Because the energy you allow into your life will either build your empire or burn it to the ground. Choose wisely. A woman who talks more than she thinks is a danger not just to others, but to herself. She doesn't understand the power of her own words. She uses language as a weapon, not a tool. Her tongue moves before her mind has had a moment to weigh the consequences. Every emotion she feels, frustration, jealousy, irritation, spills out immediately without filtration. And in doing so, she burns bridges she'll later wish she could rebuild. You can always tell the difference between a wise woman and a foolish one by the way she handles silence. A wise woman respects the pause between thought and speech. She knows that what you don't say often speaks louder than what you do. But the foolish woman feels uncomfortable in quiet. She fears what silence might reveal, about her insecurity, about her lack of self-control, about the shallow foundation of her beliefs. So she fills the space with noise, with complaints, gossip, constant commentary, or a need to be the center of attention. She talks because she thinks it makes her important. But in reality, the more she talks, the more you realize she has very little to say. Words are sacred in Stoic philosophy. The ancient Stoics believed that silence was not just golden, it was essential. They taught that speech should be used carefully, sparingly, and only after deep consideration. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The things you think about determine the quality of your mind. Your soul takes on the color of your thoughts." But what if there's no thought at all before the mouth opens? Then the soul is left unguarded, exposed to the wind of impulse and foolishness. A woman who always needs to speak, who interrupts, who dominates conversations, who cannot listen, she reveals that she is not in control of herself. She reacts instead of responds. And that difference defines everything. The foolish woman uses words like currency in a dying economy, recklessly and constantly, hoping quantity will make up for lack of value. She will talk over people just to prove her point. She will insert herself into discussions where she has no experience. She will argue for the sake of hearing her own voice. It's not about learning or growing for her. It's about being right, or being heard, even when she's completely wrong. She doesn't ask questions. She doesn't reflect. She simply unloads. She will cut off her friends, her partner, even strangers, to dominate a conversation. But there's a secret buried inside that behavior: insecurity. Insecurity often disguises itself as arrogance. The woman who talks too much, too loudly, and too often usually fears that if she doesn't make herself visible, she'll be forgotten. So she tries to stay in control of every social situation by talking. But in doing so, she loses something greater: respect. People may laugh, people may listen out of politeness, but deep down, they tune out. Because a voice that never rests becomes white noise. A woman who talks more than she thinks also struggles with discernment. She doesn't know when to keep a secret. She doesn't understand the concept of timing. She'll say the wrong thing at the worst time because she hasn't trained herself to observe the energy of a room, or the emotional state of the people around her. She will expose personal information without thinking. She will reveal other people's mistakes without considering the cost. And worst of all, she will speak things into existence that she later regrets, because once a word leaves your mouth, you no longer control it. It controls you. This kind of woman is also a magnet for conflict. She'll stir up drama unintentionally, simply because she speaks too soon, too strongly, and too often. She will talk behind people's backs and then act surprised when they confront her. She will say cruel things in moments of anger and expect forgiveness without accountability. And when relationships fall apart, she'll blame others without ever realizing her words lit the match that burned the connection down. A Stoic woman, on the other hand, understands the power of restraint. She observes first. She listens carefully. She speaks only when she knows her words will serve a purpose, whether to clarify, to uplift, to challenge, or to protect. She never uses her voice to inflate her ego. She doesn't need to. Her calm presence does the talking for her. Her silence is a message in itself, that she doesn't need to prove anything. And that's what makes her powerful. When a woman talks more than she thinks, she reveals she is reactive, not reflective. And a reactive person is always at the mercy of the moment. She's tossed around by emotion, by impulse, by ego. She cannot be trusted with delicate matters, with leadership, or with loyalty. Because anything you say to her might become tomorrow's gossip. Any emotional truth you reveal might be used against you in a fit of rage. And any vulnerability you share may be broadcast in her next outburst just to win an argument. The woman who talks more than she thinks is not dangerous because she is malicious. She is dangerous because she is careless. She speaks with no awareness of the damage she does, not just to others, but to her own soul. And in a world where wisdom is rare, the man who recognizes this trait and steps away in silence is not cruel. He's wise. There's a kind of woman who will do anything to be seen, but nothing to be remembered for the right reasons. She doesn't want to be respected, she wants to be admired, envied, liked, followed. She craves eyes on her. Not for what she's done, not for who she is deep down, but for how loud she can be, how provocative she can act, how well she can perform a version of herself she thinks the world will applaud. The Stoics taught that external validation is a trap. They believed that true peace and power come from within, from a life lived with virtue, character, and quiet strength. But this woman? She's a prisoner to the spotlight. Her self-worth rises and falls with the number of compliments she receives, the likes on her photos, the messages in her inbox. Without attention, she begins to unravel. She needs constant reminders that she's beautiful, desirable, special. Not because she truly believes it, but because deep down, she doesn't. Respect is earned. Attention is chased. A woman who values respect behaves differently. She carries herself with dignity. She is selective about how she presents herself, what she shares, who she gives access to. She knows her worth without needing the world to confirm it. But a woman addicted to attention has no boundaries. She'll post anything, say anything, wear anything, just to get a reaction. She may say it's just confidence, but true confidence doesn't scream for approval. True confidence doesn't need an audience to validate it. You'll find that this type of woman often confuses being wanted with being valued. She mistakes thirst with love, lust with interest, and applause with admiration. She doesn't realize that many who give her attention don't respect her. They don't care for her mind, her morals, or her potential. They see her as entertainment, not as a serious presence. But still, she chases the dopamine hit. She chooses quick approval over long-term honor. She's not building a legacy. She's building a brand. When you interact with a woman like this, you'll notice that her conversations are shallow. She'll talk endlessly about how people view her, how others are jealous of her, how she deserves more recognition. Everything is about image. You'll rarely hear her talk about service, discipline, learning, or growth. Her world revolves around being seen, not becoming better. She doesn't seek to contribute, she seeks to be celebrated. And she's often frustrated when respect doesn't follow her around like a shadow, because she doesn't understand that respect is reserved for those who earn it through consistency and character. She thrives in environments where she can be put on display. Parties, clubs, social media feeds. But when the lights dim and the attention fades, she feels empty. Not because she's truly alone, but because no one is clapping anymore. And for her, silence doesn't mean peace, it means insignificance. A woman who truly values respect can sit in solitude and still feel strong. But the attention seeker starts to unravel when no one is watching. She is often the woman who rejects the man who treats her with honor, in favor of the man who gives her highs and lows, because in her mind, chaos feels like attention. Stability feels like boredom. She will walk away from respect because she doesn't recognize its value. She's been conditioned to see attention as the prize. It's what she's always aimed for. It's what got her results in the past. So she repeats the cycle. Dress louder. Post more. Say something controversial. Exaggerate. Fabricate. Anything to not disappear. But here's the tragedy, when a woman chases attention long enough, she starts to lose parts of herself. She becomes a performance. She loses the ability to connect deeply, to sit quietly with her own thoughts, to be content without being praised. She forgets what it feels like to be genuinely respected, because she's surrounded herself with people who only offer attention in exchange for stimulation. Not appreciation. Not reverence. Just momentary infatuation. The woman who values attention over respect also tends to treat others as tools for her image. Friends become props. Relationships become social proof. Her partner isn't someone she builds with, he's someone who boosts her status. And the moment he stops providing the attention she craves, she starts looking elsewhere. Not for connection. Not for truth. But for more spotlight. Her loyalty is tied to visibility. If you don't keep her feeling important, she's gone. She will often mistake boundaries and standards for controlling behavior. If you ask her to dress with class, to speak with thoughtfulness, to protect her reputation, she'll call it oppression. But it's not oppression. It's refinement. It's a man trying to preserve the dignity of a woman he wants to build with. But she can't see that, because in her mind, any limit placed on her ability to be seen is an attack on her identity. She's not trying to grow. She's trying to be adored, and that's the core of the issue. A woman who wants attention more than respect isn't dangerous because she's loud. She's dangerous because she'll trade the sacred for the shallow. She'll abandon principles for praise. She'll compromise her values just to get noticed. And once you realize that, once you see that pattern clearly, you must understand, if you're a man who respects himself, you cannot pour your energy into someone who feeds off superficial recognition. Because if you build with a woman like that, your entire foundation will be hollow. And the moment the attention fades, so will she. There's a type of woman who has learned to weaponize her sexuality, not as a form of intimacy, but as a tactic of control. She leads with lust because it gives her immediate power. She's mastered the art of using attraction as a shortcut. She knows how to dress to be noticed, how to move to provoke, how to talk just enough to spark interest but never enough to reveal anything real. She thrives in environments where surface-level desire is enough to get her what she wants: attention, gifts, validation, or access. But the problem isn't her beauty. The problem is what lies behind it, a lack of depth. This woman has mistaken seduction for substance. She believes that being desirable is the same as being valuable. And because lust works quickly, she rarely develops herself beyond that. She doesn't invest in her mind, her character, or her emotional intelligence. She relies on her looks and the effect they have on men to carry her. But when beauty is your only currency, time becomes your greatest enemy. Because as soon as someone more attractive walks in, her leverage disappears. And if she's never built anything deeper, there's nothing left to fall back on. The Stoics believed in developing one's soul, training the mind, mastering emotions, cultivating wisdom. But a woman who leads with lust has often neglected that inner world. She lives in the mirror, not the mind. She measures herself by how many men desire her, not by how many people respect her. She doesn't ask what she brings to a relationship emotionally, spiritually, or mentally. She only asks if she's still wanted. And the tragedy is that she's usually wanted for all the wrong reasons. This woman often can't handle silence, stillness, or vulnerability. Because those moments expose the emptiness she's been avoiding. She prefers the flirtation, the tease, the chase, because they don't require real connection. They keep everything on the surface, where she feels in control. The deeper a man tries to go, asking serious questions, challenging her beliefs, inviting her to grow, the more uncomfortable she becomes. Not because she's shy, but because she's unprepared. She hasn't built anything beneath the surface, and now that someone's trying to see more, she doesn't know what to show. She's also quick to confuse lust with love. If a man desires her intensely, she takes that as proof that she's winning. She thrives in passion, in drama, in the highs and lows that come with physical obsession. But she doesn't understand how shallow that foundation is. Desire without depth is a fire with no fuel. It burns hot, but it dies fast. And when the fire burns out, and the man starts looking for something real, she often has nothing to offer but more of the same. She'll often find herself in a cycle of short-lived relationships, filled with intensity but lacking trust, respect, or direction. And each time one ends, she assumes the man wasn't strong enough, committed enough, passionate enough. She never looks inward. She never questions whether she's cultivated anything worth staying for. Because in her mind, being attractive is supposed to be enough. But it never is. It never has been. The woman who leads with lust also tends to fear genuine intimacy. She can undress in front of a man but feels terrified at the thought of exposing her insecurities, her fears, or her past. Physical closeness is easy. Emotional nakedness is not. So she keeps everything in a carefully controlled box. The makeup is perfect. The persona is polished. But if you scratch beneath the surface, there's confusion. There's emptiness. There's a woman who doesn't really know herself outside of how others respond to her body, and this lack of depth isn't just a personal issue, it's a relational one. Because no real partnership can survive on lust alone. A man of value doesn't stay because a woman looks good. He stays because he can build with her. He stays because she sharpens him, inspires him, supports him. He stays because there's substance. But if every conversation circles back to attention, jealousy, validation, or sexual control, he eventually pulls away. Not because he didn't enjoy the physical connection, but because he saw that there was no real growth beyond it. In many cases, the woman who leads with lust also uses her sexuality as a defense mechanism. Somewhere along the line, she may have been taught that being desirable was her only worth. Maybe she was praised too much for her looks and not enough for her thoughts. Maybe she learned early on that men paid attention when she dressed a certain way or acted a certain way. And so she began to build her entire identity around that one trait. But what begins as empowerment often turns into entrapment. Because now, she doesn't know who she is without the performance. The Stoic would say that the body fades but the soul remains. Character, wisdom, kindness, those are timeless. But a woman who has never invested in those things finds herself in crisis the moment her external appeal begins to wane. The compliments slow down. The attention shifts elsewhere. And suddenly, she's lost, not because she's no longer beautiful, but because she never built a life beyond being beautiful. A woman who leads with lust and lacks depth may get attention, but she rarely earns devotion. She may attract many, but she connects with few. And when the game gets old, and the thrill wears off, she's left searching for meaning in a world she never prepared herself to enter. There's a dangerous kind of weakness that doesn't look weak on the surface. It sounds emotional, it appears vulnerable, and it draws sympathy. But it isn't honest vulnerability, it's manipulation disguised as helplessness. It's the pattern of playing the victim while avoiding responsibility. Some women have mastered this role. They never do anything wrong, but somehow always suffer. Nothing is ever their fault. The blame always lands on others, men, family, friends, the world, their past, their emotions. Everyone is to blame, except them. The Stoics taught that the first mark of maturity is owning your role in your suffering. They didn't deny that life is harsh. But they believed in accountability. They believed a person should seek to control what they can, endure what they must, and never surrender their agency to excuses. But the woman who plays the victim sees life through a different lens. She doesn't seek strength, she seeks pity. She finds comfort in being the one who was wronged, the one who was betrayed, the one who was misunderstood. Because as long as she is the victim, she's never responsible for change. She will cry about toxic relationships while repeating the same cycles with different men. She will complain about how no one supports her, even though she burns bridges and demands more than she gives. She'll say, "Nobody listens to me," but refuses to listen when others offer advice. She's not interested in solutions. She's addicted to the story that makes her the hero and the martyr all at once. In her world, personal accountability is an attack. Feedback is cruelty. Boundaries are betrayal. Because if you hold her to a higher standard, you're suddenly the villain. You'll notice that this kind of woman is never at peace for long. There's always some emotional drama, some misunderstanding, some fresh wound that keeps the spotlight on her. And in many cases, she manufactures chaos just to maintain control. Because playing the victim isn't just about being innocent, it's about staying in power. If she's always the one who's hurt, then she's always the one who must be catered to. She uses guilt the way a tyrant uses fear. And anyone who challenges her narrative gets labeled as cold, toxic, or abusive. She never truly apologizes. If she does, it's laced with deflection, "I'm sorry you feel that way," or "I wouldn't have done that if you hadn't." Her version of remorse is performance, not reflection. She might shed tears, but those tears are often a shield against real growth. Because growth requires honesty. And honesty requires looking in the mirror and admitting, "I caused this. I allowed this. I need to change." But she won't go there. That's too much pressure. Too much truth. So instead, she clings to the comfort of victimhood. In relationships, this behavior is poison. She'll twist every disagreement into a personal attack. If you try to speak truth, she'll say you're too harsh. If you hold her accountable, she'll say you don't love her unconditionally. She'll turn her mistakes into your responsibility. She expects to be forgiven instantly but rarely forgives others. She wants loyalty without earning trust. She wants freedom without discipline. And when things go wrong, it's always because someone else didn't understand her, wasn't patient enough, or didn't treat her right. The woman who plays the victim also thrives in echo chambers. She surrounds herself with people who will validate her pain without questioning her role in it. She collects sympathy like currency and uses her wounds as a way to dodge real conversations. And if anyone gets close enough to challenge her behavior, she distances herself. She cuts them off and claims they were negative or unsupportive. In truth, she just couldn't manipulate them anymore. What she doesn't understand is that true strength isn't found in always being right or being coddled, it's found in being real. In saying, yes, I messed up. In saying, I've got things to work on. That's where power is. That's where growth begins. But the woman stuck in victim mode doesn't want growth. She wants comfort. She wants the illusion of strength without the responsibility it demands. Even when she's clearly the one at fault, she'll find a way to spin the story. She'll say, I only acted that way because I was hurt, or if you really cared, you'd know why I snapped. Her logic is circular, anything she does is justified by her pain, and anything you do is judged by how it makes her feel. There is no accountability, only emotional blackmail. And over time, the people around her start to walk on eggshells. Not because they're wrong, but because they're tired. Tired of being the villain in a story they didn't write. Tired of being drained by someone who refuses to take ownership of their own life. This type of woman may convince many people that she's a victim. She may gain sympathy, attention, even followers. But she will never gain peace. Because peace doesn't come from being comforted, it comes from being honest. And as long as she avoids responsibility, she will avoid the very transformation she secretly craves. The truth is, life will always be unfair in some way. Pain is real. Trauma is real. But strength comes from how we respond to it. And the woman who refuses to own her choices, her words, her actions, no matter how painful her past, will remain a prisoner to a narrative that keeps her small. Playing the victim might protect her ego, but it destroys her potential. There are women who cannot survive without conflict, not because they love chaos, but because they don't know who they are without it. Peace feels foreign to them. Stillness feels empty. They've grown addicted to the emotional roller coaster, to the highs of attention and the lows of confrontation. They crave intensity over intimacy. They create storms in calm weather, not because the storm is necessary, but because the silence is unbearable. A peaceful life would force them to sit with themselves, and that is something they've spent their entire lives avoiding. The woman who lives in drama will often pretend she wants peace. She'll talk about wanting a calm relationship, a trustworthy man, a predictable future. But in practice, she sabotages every quiet moment with suspicion, accusation, or self-manufactured conflict. If there's no issue, she'll invent one. If things are good, she'll test them. If you treat her with consistency and clarity, she'll call it boring or suspicious. Because to her, calm doesn't feel real. Drama does. Love, in her mind, must include chaos. If it doesn't hurt, it must not be passionate. If it's not dramatic, it must not be deep. And so she pushes peace away in pursuit of an emotional high she calls love, but it's really dysfunction. This kind of woman thrives on emotional reactions. She wants a response. Silence frustrates her. Logic threatens her. If you don't get angry, she accuses you of not caring. If you don't chase her after she storms off, she says you're heartless. She equates peace with indifference. And so, she'll poke you until you break, then cry when you explode. She wants the fireworks, not the fireplace. She confuses emotional chaos with connection, and she doesn't realize she's poisoning every potential for real intimacy in the process. She often surrounds herself with similar people, friends who gossip constantly, who live for the next scandal, who encourage her to overreact and never self-reflect. She feeds off their energy because it validates her worldview. If everyone else is loud, messy, and dramatic, then her behavior feels normal. But it's not. It's a trap. And the longer she stays in it, the harder it becomes to escape. Because drama isn't just an emotional habit, it becomes an identity. And once that identity takes hold, peace feels like death to the ego. The Stoics spoke of ataraxia, a state of inner tranquility, freedom from disturbance. But that kind of stillness requires discipline. It requires emotional maturity. It requires a willingness to face yourself without distraction. But the woman who lives in drama has used noise to avoid herself for so long that silence becomes unbearable. She fills every quiet space with something, an argument, a complaint, a crisis, a post online aimed at someone. She's not at peace unless something is wrong. Because when everything is calm, she has to confront the emptiness inside, and that terrifies her more than anything else. This woman often jumps from relationship to relationship, job to job, friendship to friendship, because she mistakes intensity for importance. If a man isn't arguing with her, he must not care. If a friend doesn't take her side blindly, they must be disloyal. She can't tolerate neutrality. Everything has to be black or white, either you're for her or against her, obsessed or indifferent, perfect or evil. There's no room for complexity, no room for nuance. And peace, by its very nature, requires both I and her romantic life. This often shows up as testing behavior, silent treatments, emotional games, passive-aggressive comments designed to provoke a response. She doesn't want clarity. She wants chaos disguised as passion. She'll say she hates the drama, but she's the one keeping the pot boiling. And if you call it out, she'll flip it on you, say you're too sensitive, too cold, too weak to handle a real woman. But it's not strength to create storms where there are none. It's not power to exhaust the people who care about you. What she doesn't see is that true power lies in emotional control. True intimacy comes from peace, from safety, from calm connection that doesn't need to be shaken to feel real. But she's never learned to trust peace. Maybe she grew up around dysfunction and internalized it as normal. Maybe she was only ever noticed when things were falling apart. Whatever the reason, she now mistakes chaos for identity. And until she breaks that pattern, every relationship she enters will follow the same destructive arc. Eventually, even the most patient man will grow tired. He will see that no amount of love, reassurance, or emotional strength can outlast a woman addicted to drama. You can't build a stable home on an earthquake. You can't build a future with someone who sees peace as the enemy. And no matter how much you care, if she's not willing to face her addiction to chaos, she'll destroy everything just to feel something. This kind of woman isn't evil. She's often just afraid. Afraid of being forgotten in the quiet. Afraid of being exposed in the calm. But fear doesn't justify destruction. Pain doesn't excuse dysfunction. And until she chooses to value peace more than attention, more than control, more than temporary emotional highs, she will continue to burn down everything good in her life, and call the ashes proof that she's alive. It's a pattern that has played out for generations, women rejecting the men who would cherish them for the ones who mistreat them. It's not just about attraction. It's about chaos versus character, ego versus essence. Some women will look a good man in the eye, a man who's solid, present, grounded, and feel nothing. No spark. No tension. No drama. And so they call him boring, say he lacks excitement, and turn away. But what they're really saying is this: he doesn't feed my dysfunction. He doesn't mirror the emotional chaos I've grown addicted to. A good man offers stability. He doesn't play games. He communicates clearly, respects boundaries, shows up when he says he will. He doesn't leave a woman guessing. He doesn't manipulate emotions just to prove his worth. But to the unhealed woman, that feels too easy. Too calm. Too exposed. She doesn't know how to receive consistency because inconsistency is what she knows. And so she runs, not because the good man did anything wrong, but because he didn't trigger the chase she's used to. So she turns to the man who won't commit, who keeps her guessing, who texts back when he feels like it and disappears when she needs him most. He's cold, distant, emotionally unpredictable, and somehow, that feels like love. Because deep down, she's not looking for a partner. She's looking for a project. She doesn't want to be loved, she wants to be chosen. And she believes that if she can make the wrong man love her, it will finally prove her worth. But the truth is, you never win trying to prove your value to someone who sees you as an option. The woman who chases bad men often convinces herself she's just passionate, romantic, or intense. She says things like, "I like a challenge," or "I can't help who I'm attracted to." But those are just smokescreens for emotional trauma. She's not chasing love, she's chasing validation. And she's addicted to the emotional roller coaster because it mirrors the instability she carries within. When love feels peaceful, she doesn't trust it. When it feels secure, she assumes something's wrong. So she gravitates toward the man who is emotionally unavailable, unpredictable, or even abusive, because he feels familiar, and the irony is, the good man is often the one who would have helped her heal. He's not perfect, but he's grounded. He wants connection, not control. He leads with honesty, not manipulation. But because he doesn't feed her insecurities, she finds reasons to disqualify him. He's too nice. There's no spark. He's not my type. She says these things to protect her ego, but in reality, it's fear. Fear of being seen. Fear of receiving something she doesn't believe she deserves. Fear of facing her own reflection in the calm mirror of a healthy relationship. The Stoics taught that we are not disturbed by things, but by our interpretation of them. A woman who chases the wrong men doesn't do so because they're inherently more desirable, it's because her mind has twisted chaos into meaning. She interprets neglect as a challenge. She sees withdrawal as depth. She reads toxic patterns as passion. And so she suffers again and again, wondering why love always hurts, not realizing she keeps choosing the wound over the remedy. A good man will challenge her in a different way. Not with games, but with growth. He'll require her to communicate, to be honest, to receive love without manipulation. And that's scary for someone who's used to drama. Because in healthy love, there's no space to hide. You can't disappear and expect to be chased. You can't create a mess and expect to be rescued. You have to show up. Fully. And for the woman who's never had to do that, it feels unnatural. So she pushes him away and tells herself he wasn't the one. The tragedy is, many of these women wake up years later, tired, jaded, and angry. They ask where all the good men went. But the truth is, they passed them by a long time ago. Not because those men were lacking, but because peace wasn't appealing at the time. And by the time they're ready, many of those men have moved on, either exhausted or finally choosing a woman who saw their value before it was too late. This pattern isn't about evil or stupidity, it's about conditioning. Many women have been conditioned by media, by trauma, or by culture to equate intensity with love. They've been taught that love has to hurt, that a man has to be dominant or distant to be desirable. And so they reject the very thing that would heal them. A good man doesn't make them feel insecure. He doesn't keep them up at night wondering where they stand. And because they've mistaken anxiety for affection, they assume that if they don't feel that anxiety, it must not be real love. But the truth is, real love is calm. It's present. It's stable. It doesn't need to be chased. It invites you to be yourself. It doesn't leave you second-guessing your worth. A good man will never be the loudest in the room, the flashiest on social media, or the most dramatic in his approach, but he'll be there. Solid. Steady. Real. And until a woman values peace more than passion, clarity more than chaos, and depth more than drama, she'll keep running toward the fire and wondering why she keeps getting burned. The truth is, Stoic wisdom isn't here to attack, shame, or degrade, it's here to awaken. Not every woman will fit these signs, but the ones who do are not beyond change. Ignorance can be corrected. Immaturity can be outgrown. But only if it's confronted with brutal honesty. A wise woman seeks growth. A foolish one rejects correction. And a stupid one clings to dysfunction like it's a virtue. If you're a man listening to this, understand this: the woman you choose will either elevate your peace or destroy it. Choose character over curves. Choose depth over drama. Protect your mind, your mission, and your energy. If she mocks your values, disrespects your time, and lives in emotional chaos, it's not your job to fix her, it's your responsibility to walk away. And if you're a woman listening, let this be a mirror, not a sentence. If you see yourself in any of these signs, don't justify it, outgrow it. You were not made to be small, petty, or chaotic. You were made to be powerful, peaceful, and principled. But that can only happen when you let go of stupidity disguised as strength. Wisdom begins when we stop lying to ourselves. And the sooner you do, the freer you become.